Today we have facilitating today's discussions Todd Waldron, Chief Commercial Officer at REPOWR. Todd brings over 17 years in transportation and logistics, including time at J.B. Hunt, C.H. Robinson, and most recently as VP of Carrier Experience at Truck Stop. Todd is passionate about improving the experience for drivers and carriers alike. Joining him is Mike McDonough of McDonough Truck Lines. Mike is the Chief Operations Officer for McDonough with over 20 years experience in trucking. Also on the panel is Dale Prax, founder of Freight Validate and strategic freight fraud advisor to Truck Stop. With more than 32 years in transportation, Dale is one of the leading voices in freight fraud prevention, working directly with regulators, lawmakers, and law enforcement to fight carrier identity theft and freight fraud. Rounding out the panel is Nate Johnson, CEO of GLCS. With nearly 30 years in trucking and logistics from professional driver to company owner, Nate now helps fleets navigate IT and freight technology and hosts the Driving Forward podcast. Please welcome our panel.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for being here. It's great to get a chance to get together, talk about a topic that nobody wants to have to talk about, but we certainly do in today's environment. I'm joined with some very esteemed and experienced panelists in this area with a variety of backgrounds, as Chris laid out for us. And so we're going to talk about, kind of go through and lay out a few different things as it relates to freight fraud and the components within. So we're going to talk about how it works, what's the current state, and what's been evolving in this segment or this area, what to look for, what to watch out for, and then most importantly, what can we do about it? As you walk out of here, what can you do as you go back to work on Monday with your teams? What's the important things to be looking for and watching out for? Some updated numbers, $20.9 billion lost to cybercrime in 2025. 26% loss growth in a single year. And so we continue to see this trend going in the wrong direction. So to you guys, why do you think trucking is such a target now for this? And what are some of the things you're seeing from a numbers standpoint as you look at this ever-growing risk and concern?
Me first?
Sure.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. That one picks up. So mine's better than yours. So largely trucking is a target because of the value of the commodities that you're hauling, as well as the fact that typically speaking, you have been regularly ignorant of cybersecurity. We work with about 400 fleets across North America, and the vast majority of them don't have the baseline defenses deployed. And they're really not expensive defenses to put into place. It doesn't take an IT specialist to do so. You can do a lot of this on your own. And baseline defenses are everything. If you make yourself look a little bit more difficult to target than the next person in the line of the bad guys, they're going to move on to the next person. And unfortunately, we don't want to direct it to our peers, but that is the play in the game currently today.
Yeah, I think you have to be, like Nate said, you have to be faster than the person in front of you when you're being behind you when you're being chased by a bear. So the most important thing is that too many people depend on cybersecurity as something that happens after something happens to them. And I think that the industry's been really bad at being reactive rather than proactive.
Yeah, I think I agree with what we're saying here. I think in trucking, we're also, I want to say complicit in kind of how we behave, right? We see others in the industry as our peers, and we look at them and go, hey, they're out here working just as hard like we are. Our defenses are down because we're very human towards people who may have bad intentions. And we may recognize it as, hey, they're just out here trying to earn a buck just like we are. So I think initially our defenses are down. Secondly, all the things that they just said, we're operating lean, we're not paying attention, we're moving quickly, much faster than we should. I guarantee you every company in this room has had a link that was clicked that shouldn't have been clicked. And that leads to issues.
And one thing to add there real quick, so $20.9 billion in cybercrime. These numbers are widely different. 20.9 for 2025 is actually the low number. That's not including losses. So if this is the damage done to an organization, but not the long-term loss that may go with it. Cybercrime as a worldwide problem is a $10.6 trillion problem. It's the third largest GDP in the world, if you add in losses. So this is something that impacts everyone, including small operators, individuals, and the largest of companies in business.
And if you look at what Nate's saying, 2020 to current, this issue is up 1,500%. I mean, nothing is up 1,500% in this industry besides that.
Awesome. The load is your loot, your name is the weapon. And so, Mike, I'll start with you, but give us some perspective from your real world examples as a small carrier. And what are a few of, or a small snippet of the stories? Mike's kept me on the phone for many hours going through his stories, so I'll try to keep them to just a couple minutes.
Yeah.
If you're capable.
Yeah, we'll see. So in our instance, we had a scenario in which we were both acting as informant for law enforcement. And during that action of being an informant, we were kind of serendipitously spoofed, right? So what happened is, what started as we were being an informant then led to us being spoofed. And the moment we were spoofed, the moment they basically got us, they posted, now we have two people that answer phones in our office, right? This was in the, we'll call it the peak of the freight crash, where if you posted a load on DAT, your phone would ring for about 3 hours. They posted 8,500 loads in 35 minutes. And if you can imagine what that did to our infrastructure at that point in time, it's pretty crazy. What they didn't know is that we were taking all that information, all those emails, all those phone calls, and forward them directly to the FBI. And 20 months later, 17 members of the Armenian Mafia were arrested in Los Angeles. Crazy.
Wild.
How did you get hooked up with the FBI? Was there something that already came in and came to you, or?
Yeah, so what happened with us is we recognized that who we were attempting to broker a load to was not who they said they were. So long story short, we called them. The guy on the phone was like, hey, let me add the guy from the FBI who's working our case on the phone. And I immediately went, nobody has the FBI on speed dial. And about 10 minutes later, a guy from the FBI was on the phone with us. And about 15 minutes after that, Hennepin County was there with a GPS tracker for us to place in a load, which was crazy.
Yeah, FBI has really stepped up their game in the last probably 18 months since this new administration came in. It used to be if you had a load stolen, you'd call the local police, say, I know nothing about it. FBI would say that it's not egregious enough, we're not going to handle it. We're talking to guys like the cargo FBI unit in Philadelphia. Jason Knight's a special agent there, and he says that $5,000 load could be the missing puzzle piece he needed. So they're asking you to call out to some of these places. And I'll leave my card up here if you all want to get a hold of me. I can get you some of that information on who those guys are.
Yeah, so Nate and Dale, you guys have the opportunity to work with many different carriers, many different brokers. Is what Mike saw an anomaly, or is what's some of the things that you've seen across carriers and across brokers?
Well, I think, like we talked earlier when it talks about cycles of the freight industry, the same thing happens with fraud in the freight industry. When they see a vulnerability, they're going to take over and go for it. The biggest vulnerability we're seeing right now is, for a long time, from 2020 till probably present, it was all about fraud and cargo theft, and people were really concentrating on getting really good platforms to protect yourself from those things. But since that time, we look at post-Montgomery, now most brokers and carriers are talking about getting sued. So it's like, how do I stop myself from getting sued? The bad guys see you let up on the gas a little bit with fraud and start, now I'm going to attack that because you've left your eye off the ball. So we're seeing it, it's really prevalent, and it's hard to stop. And those bad guys need money now because, as Administrator Barr said, we're putting a lot of guys out of business. They still got to stay in business. There's a huge return on investment for being a bad guy.
Yeah, this is absolutely a business. People come in and punch clocks to do this. So, and if you think you're wrong, if you don't think that's accurate, I mean, especially offshore, but even onshore, as Mike alluded to, there was a Armenian group that was closed. But I mean, ultimately, fraud is a business, and there are literally employees involved.
Just to add that really quickly, we go, I go to conferences, we all go to conferences all over the place, and just like we're talking right now and listening to panels, there are bad guys that are sitting in those same chairs, listening to how we do things and trying to infiltrate that information. It happens all the time. We've caught them many times.
So do we have a question here?
No, it's probably not one of the bad guys in the room.
Fair enough. So one of the, I mean, we used to be, and I come from the fleet side and have run carriers for half my career. We were worried about load security, right? Getting a load hijacked. That's not the primary focus today. Is them, hijacking your truck. Although that does still happen, cargo securement and whatnot is still extremely important. Today, the largest mover is spoof domains and communication attacks. So to Mike's point, he got a lot of emails. We've handled numerous situations where you're not even doing anything wrong, you're not even exposed, but all of a sudden you get 10,000 various loads tendered to you. And what's happening is somebody is spoofing you as a carrier to brokers. They've booked a load and they know that tender is coming to you and they want that tender to be hidden in your email. So they blast you, and this is especially, lots of brokers want you to have dispatch at xyztrucking.com, but if you have that, you're now exposed to that 5,000 emails into the email box, and you don't know what real load actually is there. And then what they'll turn around is they'll have that driver call for dispatch, and unfortunately, brokerage 101 says don't give the load to the guy until you have a signed rate confirmation. And that still happens, and the driver gets dispatched. They go, okay, pick up the load, and shortly after that, that load is gone. So, but that's a very common scenario, and I think it's about 50% growth year over year on the communication tax here. But I do believe we're growing numbers that we knew of before, but to the point of the FBI is tracking it, state and local law enforcement are tracking it. We are identifying these scenarios as an industry much more accurately than we were when Dale and I first met, probably 3 years ago or so.
Nate, how important, as you work with companies, how important is their vendor relationships, and how much can that impact? Like, if you keep your own house in order, what's the additional risk of outside companies that you work with, and have you seen that play into the equation?
Has anyone heard of AI? So we vet we probably vet 1 to 2 AI solutions a day. First thing that we do with an AI solution today is say, are you SOC 2? If you are not, we don't want to talk to you anymore. So there's too many AI solutions, and that's unfortunate. There's some really good ones, but ultimately, what are you typically using AI for? Expediting orders. Well, here's all of my order information. I've never met you before. I'm going to put this all out there, and poof, it's gone. Everyone has your order information. Now, that is not realistically what happens. Typically, it's a nefarious, you don't know who's watching in the background. Just imagine all your email is monitored, and that's probably the best case for you. So you don't want to put digital information that's out there. But certainly on the vendor side, you want to work with vendors that understand security and are security first. Just like safety is absolutely in your core values and first within your organizations, on the technology side, they need to be looking at security to ensure that your data is not going out to everyone.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that you really have to know who you're working with. I think, relationships are probably the most important thing we have in trucking. But sorry to say, relationships have caused us to get where we are because we are such a trusting environment. Back when my dad was an owner-operator, we all met truck stop talking, we all knew each other. Now we don't know who we're dealing with anymore, especially when you get to AI. They can sound like that guy from Minnesota. Right? So you don't really know who you're dealing with, and that's what we're really, everything is focusing more on that and knowing who you're dealing with all the time. That's the best relationship you can have. I'd much rather deal with somebody I've been dealing with for 10 years than somebody I just pull off the truck's load board or dad load board.
And phone calls matter to an extent, but they're also, as Dale said, spoofable. You think, you're a person who's issuing payments, so anyone on the AP side may get a phone call from their boss saying, write this check, and that wasn't their boss. We've actually been in scenarios where companies have had similar things happen where, whether it was an AI solution that was mimicking a voice. I'm a talking head, so you can probably figure out how to recreate my voice, Dale's voice, whoever, fairly quickly. And then applied in mass. These are not people dealing with it in many cases. So you hit 10,000 fleets in a day and maybe you get one.
On today's point about data security and AI adoption, I think that as trucking companies, we are hit with so many solutions to help us be more efficient, help us save money. This is one thing to think about. How many people in this room have seen something that says, we'll help you find outsourced dispatchers overseas? There's a prime example. They work for $8 an hour. I don't know a single dispatcher that works for $8 an hour, but it's really tempting to look at to save your company money. However, you don't know, you're sharing data with them. Once they're in their environment, you don't know what they're doing with that data. So keep a lid on your data, keep a lid on your stuff, have it in one house. If you're thinking about AI, have your AI adoption policy, have clean data from your direct data source to a direct trusted AI such as chat, Copilot, whatever. That's a very single connection.
A major mistake we're making, I think, as an industry is we're using AI to make our decisions rather than speeding up our decision process. And that's where I think a lot of folks are failing.
Yeah, definitely. And there are decision processes that are okay, and there are safe ways to approach these technologies. But many people come in, and if you've ever heard the term vibe coding, you get a dispatcher who has a great idea, and it is a great idea, but then they go build it themselves using modern tools, which are not secure typically. So you want to be aware of those, and unfortunately some of those products are in market and are soliciting you today. So ultimately having that awareness, if you are going to work with a modern LLM like Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot, ensure that you have the right licensing so that your data is your data and it's not being shared with everyone else.
Awesome. Does it matter where you're at or what's your persona in the chain or the supply chain in regards to how likely you are to either A, be targeted, but as well as your responsibility? So we have shippers, brokers, carriers, drivers. Is there anyone that has more responsibility than the other and or is targeted more actively than any of the others?
I want to jump on. So if shippers would be compliant on this, we wouldn't have this problem. Brokers communicating with shippers, carriers communicating with shippers on this is my driver, this is my truck, this is my trailer. You have that relationship. This problem would be much smaller, but we can't get, and we're starting to, and I think Cree versus Montgomery has exposed the shippers to what might be coming their way. So ultimately, if shippers would comply and verify simply a truck driver and trailer, a lot of this gets eliminated almost immediately.
Yeah. And the bad guys key on the shipper. I mean, if you notice any cargo theft or fraud, it happens usually during the holidays when I'm in a hurry to get out of here. I got to do these things fast. You're going to make a dumb decision really fast, get your truck off the load off your dock so you can go play baseball with your kid, right? So you have to really slow down, take time, and we talk about the shipper's dock. Drivers have responsibility and an ability to ask questions. We've been vetting drivers and brokers for years, right? So it's time for drivers and carriers to ask questions, right? When you're at the dock picking up a load, your driver should say, who did you broker this load to? It should match who they got the load from. And that's where double brokering comes in. People aren't asking those questions. And that's not technology. That's a driver saying, I have to do diligence for my company.
I think that's a perfect segue from Nate to Dale to me, from the carrier perspective. I look at this as like pure chicken or egg, right? Shippers, absolutely, with Nate saying 100% right. But we all know our shippers don't know crap half the time, right? They give us stuff not knowing what they're doing. They give us hazmat loads not even understanding their own product is hazmat. They don't know how to document their paperwork. So I believe us as carriers, we have to be the front line. We have to be the boots on the ground. We have to educate our shippers. We have to educate our drivers, to Dale's point, to say, hey, read your paperwork. Section 7 matters, right? Carmack Amendment matters. Do all the little things right, and a lot of this goes away.
Yeah, shippers have got to stop using price as their KPI. You have to use your carrier because he's teaching you how to do things right. He's protecting you from bad guys. The days of price being your KPI have got to go away. You've got to be a better carrier. You've got to be able to train your shippers. Here's what I'm looking for to protect you.
Yes, absolutely.
So in the good old days, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, straight theft was the highest percentage of cargo thefts, right? Breaking into a yard and or unsecured trailer, breaking in, pilfering, and or taking freight off or stealing the trailer itself. Much more higher risk for the criminals. Walk us through now, and we've talked about this a little bit, but walk through in more details the autonomy of identity-based theft and some of the components, and if you have specific examples, but I'd like to hear from each of you.
Sure. So it usually starts with a misclick. And something like 80, the number also varies on this, it ranges between 85 and 90% of all cyber events include a training issue from one of your personnel. But you can just click on the wrong email and now they're into the email and they're gonna sit there and monitor that and they're gonna get some data. There's plenty of other ways that this can happen, but ultimately this is the most common type of attack. And what actually happens, it can be a wide variety of things. It can be months until they take action. It can perpetuate, so one person moves to many. That's very, very common as well. So the next thing you know, all your emails being monitored. There's ways to prevent that, which we have another slide to talk about some of that. From there on out, they have far more intelligence on what you're doing, what you're moving than what they did prior to having that information. And they can take a multitude of different actions, which Dale could probably cite them right off the top of his head. I have a million, but Dale's better at talking about this than I am. So.
Yeah, I think we make too many mistakes about giving out too much information. I was looking at a guy the other day, sent me an email and wondered why his identity was stolen. And I looked at his email signature. It said his name, his MC number, his DOT number, give me a Google review. Here's a link to my personal Facebook page, and all this stuff on there. And I said, you have customers, they already know all about you. You're feeding bad guys information so that they can cut and paste that and be you tomorrow. So there's a lot of that going on. I think there's nobody that's any better, I guess, than anybody else. From even and we'll talk about this in a couple slides, but even the U.S. government, when you go to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, whether it's MOTORS or the old L&I, that people are getting into there and stealing your identity through various means.
Yeah, I think this fraud topic is such a crazy topic because if you just look at freight from 2020 to now, we've had the highest highs and the lowest lows, right? In a 4-year window. You look at that and you look at the fraud that's come out of this. For fraud to exist, you have to have like an opportunity for it. You have to have a reason to do it, and you have to have some motivation, right, behind it. Well, if I look at 2020 to now, all those things are immensely present, right? We see a flood of MC numbers enter during COVID. We watch freight fly away, and now these people who maybe invested everything into their business, their entire life savings, they got to get their money back, and they got to get their money back any way they can. I'm not saying that's everybody, but I just look at the correlation between where we're at and now. And I look at that and go, it had to be people from the inside who know how we talk, who know how we communicate, who know how we book loads, who weaponize load boards against us, to use those load boards as never-ending CRMs. I post a load, I get 7,000 email contacts. I know I posted a load on Truckstop or DAT or whatever load board. Well, now I have 7,000 emails that I can send a phishing link to. It's genius how they did this. It's like maddening how they did this as well. And it's kind of hard to be on this panel and talk about this because, you know, as we're out there just trying to make a buck turning wheels, this is something that we should never had to have gone through. And we shouldn't be having this discussion, but in a little way, we did it to ourselves.
We wish we weren't, but one note to add to this is various freight fraud assaults where you lose loads, ensure that you are covered on your, ensure that, or go get with your insurance agent and ensure that you are covered, and if you are not, that you understand where those lines are, because people will lose loads in these scenarios and they are fully on the hook for all the cargo.
Dale, hijacked from a jail cell. How does that happen? What happened?
This particular person, his name is Dimitri Sayuri. He owns Select Corporation out of Indiana. He was arrested on November 21st. He was an illegal alien. He owned a trucking company in Indiana. On his application for operating authority, he said he was a U.S. citizen. We have court documents to prove he was not for the last 10 years, been living in the country illegally. He's currently in federal custody waiting to be deported. He was arrested on the 21st of November. On the 30th of December, he filed his MCS 150 electronically from jail. Really, I don't think that happened. So he got through the old system. Modus now is coming aboard to stop these kind of things. You've heard maybe the administrator talk about, they caught 12 that were trying to do this sort of thing. But that's an example of how when they steal your identity, this guy was in jail and someone stole his identity. This could even have been someone that worked for him to keep his company going, right? It could have been somebody who stole it, said he knew they were in jail, so they stole his identity. The funny thing about this mugshot here, that guy, when I talked about a little earlier about the bad guys come to your places to watch, on his Facebook page is a picture of him in a broker carrier summit lanyard. He was there watching what's going on. So you have to be real cognizant of what you kind of even say here about how you stop fraud and how you look for the bad guys. So yeah, he was able to not only file that with the MCS 150 with the federal government, he also updated his information with the Secretary of State's office in Indiana electronically while he was in jail. We have a voice recording from the deputy at the jail saying there's no way he had access to the internet. And the sad thing, the other sad part about this whole thing, this is part of a group that's based in Moldova. The owner of that company owns 150 trucking companies in the United States. They're a dispatch service that has 350 employees in Moldova. He was on Moldovan national TV. You can look on YouTube and see him talking on Moldovan TV, how he was able to make $1 billion off U.S. trucking companies, while Carol Fulmer, after 50 years, goes out of business. That's why we got to be real cognizant of these guys and watch what they're doing.
So to Dale's point on not talking about this because we're worried about those that are in the room, they're learning where we're currently at.
Yeah.
We are behind them. We're always going to be behind them. They're very smart and they're moving very quickly. Every tool that you're leveraging to stop this, they're finding a tool to work around it or they already have it. So, talk about it. So there's nothing you're going to say that's going to block this up or create a scenario. What I wouldn't do is talk about it in great detail around any sort of company secrets.
Right. That's what I'm getting. When you're talking about your way to stop them from doing it, you probably don't want to broadcast that because they're going to overstep. They're going to find it eventually anyway. They have more time, energy, and money and ROI than we have. So you're going to keep fighting. This next slide is kind of important. We've all heard about Modus and what the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration do about Modus. We're all seeing the headaches that are going through it. This is a massive piece of software that's being developed. I mean, this is bigger than a lot. But we've all weathered the storm before. In 2000, we had ICC to FMCSA. We had to go through all of that process. 2013, we had to go through it again with the uniform registration system. But now we have to redo it because there's fraud involved in it. So now, not only are we doing registration, we're also trying to fight fraud from bad guys from getting in. So the Modus system is going to help stop that. This is prior to Modus. This is the old L&I licensing insurance. See the red where it says, warning, the contact information is record may not accurately represent the entity. FMCSA strongly encourages users to independently verify all details. In my opinion, that should be the job of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. I shouldn't have to Google to make sure his information is correct. If it were me in that situation at perhaps the FMCSA, again, this has been fixed with Modus, but again, people got scammed on this kind of thing. I think that person should have got a show cause order that says, you tell me why your information is not correct in our system. Don't make my users or registrants try and find you on Google that your address matches. So thank goodness we have an administrator that's pushing this forward and not kicking the can down the road like we've done for 20 years on user registration. And that's going to stop a lot of that stuff from happening. So I think just my point on the Modus thing is We're going to hit some speed bumps. This is a massive undertaking, but I can promise you in the end, it's going to be a real difference in stopping fraud.
If your fleet's downtime looks like chaos, you're missing out on GLCS. In the time-critical world of trucking and logistics, every minute counts. Meet GLCS, your expert partner in managed IT and technology services. We integrate seamlessly with your team, bringing seasoned IT professionals with deep trucking and logistics expertise. Imagine your software updates running smoothly, complex issues resolved quickly, and operations humming with efficiency. GLCS has your back. Our support doesn't just fix problems, it prevents them with our industry connections and proactive approach. We keep your trucks rolling and your brokers working. Think of us as the added resource your company needs to unleash its full potential. Visit glcs.net today and keep your business driving forward. GLCS, where efficiency meets expertise.
Yeah, so a few different scams we've seen, like in the past, that what we've seen is the calls getting you to send them money, taking over your computer. But what's it look like today if they get into your inbox from a trucking freight fraud perspective? What's that experience look like? Is it immediate or does it take time? How do they approach it?
Definitely takes time. It can be immediate, but most of the time it's going to take time. If they're in the email box, it depends on the persona that they get to, but one of the worst that you have to watch out for is salespeople and accounts receivable. So what will happen to accounts receivable is they'll know, somehow the bad guy will figure out that somebody owes you money. They'll get a hold of that customer and redirect payment to one of their accounts. Or attempt to. And on sales, for example, you may have a deal coming in or whatever the case may be, and that person learns about that and is also able to redirect payments as needed. So training your people on all these items. One thing I want to say on this slide deck, if you want it, reach out to me afterwards. Everything in red is a critical item. Everything in green is something that you can take action on, and everything in blue is typically a fact. But there'll be a lot of green coming up here shortly.
Mike, what did in your experiences, what role did email play, or email management, or email security, and things that you've seen, and how have you then worked with your team to understand and recognize these?
As they said, it's really security training. Links are the predominant way that they find a way in, through a phishing link, through, that's the way in for them. That's the tip of the spear. But I would say it depends on what you did to them. And in the case of us being an informant, we really made them mad. So their action towards us in that moment could be way different than how they behave with somebody else. They are very smart. They're very motivated. If they know you're a high dollar freight hauler with high insurance policies, they're probably going to treat you different than somebody that has a lesser policy. They might slow burn somebody with lesser policies. They might act quickly on somebody who's known to haul meta glasses, right? So there is some motivation in kind of what they do. We always talk about this. There's a brute force attack or there's a slow play. The brute force attacks are typically more the ones that are hauling the high value freight. They'll get into a system, shut it down right away, demand money. In the back end, while they have the system locked down, they're grabbing all this information. They're creating a new website, trying to re-divert freight. At the same time, they're demanding a ransom. So these criminals have vertically integrated their fraud schemes much faster than we can, diversify our trucking logistics businesses. We spend years dreaming about opening a warehouse. They have a fake warehouse opened in 5 minutes. It's nuts.
What are, let's dive into these warning signs and kind of expand on some of the other, either expand on the ones you mentioned or some of the other warning signs to be looking for.
Well, we've already talked about a few of these, but we didn't really talk about the lookalike domains, which everybody's had experienced this, where daleprax.com has a underscore underneath the end of it, and you don't visually see it. It looks like Dale sending an email. That happens all the time, every day. You can use tools to prevent that. But to Mike's point, where you're clicking, we talked about these scenarios where they get intelligence. Well, in some cases, they can actually get to your database, right? If you're, unfortunately, I've been on far too many phone calls with all sizes of fleets. Enterprise, 15, 3,000, 4,000 trucks, on down to 50 truck operators that come in one morning and their systems are down. And so what's your plan when that happens? Many people are looking at a business interruption, a potential business ending scenario, because I've had a 1,500 truck fleet lose access to its to its TMS for 3 weeks. Could you imagine that at your organization? So training on it, they have virtually zero training when you go through and do the audit on it after the fact. And you say, where did this all go wrong? Well, everybody's not being trained on this on a monthly basis or weekly basis. So it's a topic that's very easy to build defenses up on and make yourself very undesirable to hit. But ultimately, I mean, these are all the points that I think you typically get attacked on, at least in general.
Yeah, when I was running a brokerage, we had one of the lookalike domain examples. Couldn't get a hold of the driver anymore, you don't know where the loads is, etc. That leads to, then I get the email forwarded to me and I look at the signature, looks legit, but then I look at the email address and it was something like a Big Rig Trucking was the company. The company was already approved in our system as a carrier, and so our team didn't vet further that carrier because they're already approved. But the email address it came from had one of the G's that was changed to a Q. So a very subtle change in notice that then helped us trail it back to this fake organization that then tendered it to an actual carrier, picked up the load, delivered to a fake location that was transloaded onto another truck, and then poof, it's gone. And then from there, we actually got a call that the freight was recovered at a 30,000 square foot warehouse, all of stolen product within the warehouse. The whole product was stolen product through a variety of these schemes. But it was something that was so simple and different pieces had to line up right.
I was going to say almost the exact same thing. Some of you may have been at my previous presentation with the MTA. I think of these spoof domains as like character artists. You go to Valley Fair and you get a portrait done of yourself. It looks right, but it's not correct, right? That's what these spoof domains are. One thing that I would say is if you know someone's been spoofed or you yourself has been spoofed, go find out what domain the spoof is hosted on. Report to that domain, whether it be GoDaddy, Wix, whoever. Here's the real domain, here's the fake domain, this is infringement. Those domains will get shut down quicker. The quicker you can cut their ability to work, the quicker they move on to somebody else. Because they are masters of low-hanging fruit. The minute there's a roadblock, they move on to the next thing. So the quicker you shut them down, the better off you are.
Dale, you have some very expansive relationships in the industry, but also in Washington, D.C. What have you seen from your perspective and how it's evolved and how Washington is paying attention to this issue over the last few years?
Well, we can talk about what Derek Barr, Secretary Duffy, and all those guys have done within the FMCSA and the Department of Transportation. Leaps and bounds compared to what's been happening in the last 20 years. On the Senate and the House side, this is the first time, I've been doing this for about 34 years, this is the first time I've ever seen, I think today when I looked, there were 38 bills on the floor right now that were specific to trucking. Whether it's the bathroom bill, the parking bill, Corca, any of those, I've never seen that kind of action. Although it's action, but it takes a long time to get through the process. I mean, you look at the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, that was introduced on, 29 September of 2022, it's 4 years, right? So it takes a long time. And that's why I was talking to Nate the other day about states have to get more involved in what we're doing, right? We got to push legislation within the state. If you look at the Corca bill, for example, Arizona just recently made a bill that's almost the mirror of the federal Corca bill. I think states have to be able to look at those pieces of legislation and get it passed through the state legislator a lot faster than we do in the government and the federal government. And I think that's why it's important to have these, like the Minnesota Trucking Association, Pennsylvania, talk to your states and get more laws passed here quickly. I was talking to a person who's running for governor in California, and he told me something about like imminent hazard out of service order for an unsafe carrier. That may take a long time in Washington, D.C., but he says the state can pull all their license plates, they can pull all their CDL licenses, and they can have the Secretary of State put them out of business relatively quickly. while we're waiting for the government to give them an out-of-service order, for instance. So there's a lot happening on the Hill. There's a lot happening at Washington, at FMCSA. I've never seen any action like this in years.
So what can we do about it? Let's step into the green slide points as Nate laid out nicely for us. I'm a big fan of color code. Thanks, Nate.
So, it makes it easier. So multi-factor authentication is your best tool. It's going to eliminate about 90% of your attacks. And to be honest with you, you're getting attacked all the time. I think our servers hit like 3.5 million attacks last month. We defend against that. We manage about 400 servers, something along that case. But you're getting hit probably at least 1 million times a month. If you have an IT staff, ask them for that. They have the demographics. If they don't, have them give me a call. We can point them in the right direction. But multi-factor authentication, just simply signing in twice, needing a device that you're only going to have to sign in eliminates a lot of it. Ensuring that you own your domains, ensuring that you don't allow them to open up and allow somebody to grab them. If you're a desirable domain and you let your contract slip, somebody can come in and scoop, they own it, you're screwed. You will not get that back. It is gone. Those are the biggest components with this. Segmenting your network, that starts getting into more strategy around your data and how you're offering it up. Endpoint detection response. So that's a thing that it sounds complicated, but odds are, if you're working with an IT group, if you have IT people on point, so we use tools that if someone suddenly appears in your network, but they are coming from somewhere unexpected. So you have people in the U.S. or particular locations in the U.S. and all of a sudden Canada pops up, which Canada doesn't feel like it's wrong, but it could be. Or someone from another area pops up. Not only in an endpoint detection response will you identify that, but using modern solutions, it will lock that all down, and it will lock the data that they were touching down. So it takes that point where your database gets locked up. It's going to make that much smaller and much less risky, and it's going to happen extremely fast. And if it's wrong, and an employee's in Canada trying to gain access to your systems, so what? You'd rather we have less of that happen than we do actual attacks that get quarantined.
Yeah, I think you have to also watch with, ask questions. Ask them, if you see an email address come across, Modus has really done a lot of cool things as far as you used to not be able to see the email address in LNI or McMus, right? Before you can maybe see a contact name, but it could be a registered agent's office somewhere. Now with Modus, it lists all the contact names that they put in there. It also lists their email address. So if you're looking at an email address for a company that you've been doing business for a long time, and it used to be Dale at McDonoughTrucking.com, and now it's McDonoughTrucking@gmail.com, we probably got an issue, right? So you have to look at those things and look back at Modus, which is the most up to date now, and say that doesn't match. Why doesn't it match? Or ask the person who owns your company. They may not know. And if they don't know, something's wrong, right? But you'll trip these guys up all the time. When I was a broker, I would say, oh, the guy have an accent that doesn't belong in, say, Mississippi. And I'd ask him, or in Memphis, what's your favorite barbecue? Oh, I don't know. If you live in Memphis, you know what the favorite barbecue is, we got an issue, right? So you have to be able to trip them up a little bit.
Mike, so these things are like, they're I think straightforward to process and to potentially list out as an SOP in your company. But as you look at leading people, how are you able to then take this and infiltrate it throughout your organization? Has it changed your hiring practices, your training practices? What's been challenges you've seen in that space, and how have you had to adopt how you're doing your training and teaching, as well as your motivation tactics? I think prior growing up in brokerage, the motivation was make more money and get more loads and get big rips. And now it's like, how do we slow down? Do you incentivize on safe bookings, or do you incentivize on accurate and slowness, or how do you balance some of those components?
Well, for us, we started playing a game like how many people can we catch, right? Like how sticky can we get? Which is, it sounds weird, but like we would just have our own little report. Like I recognize that these 10 people that I dealt with were not who they said they were, right? So like that's just a really simple, stupid way to introduce awareness into the climate, to the workspace. For us, that's been successful. I think the other thing is don't be quiet about this stuff, right? I think owners, managers, we tend to not want to let people know if we have situations that aren't so good, right? If we got hacked, are we going to be advertising, hey, we got hacked? No, I think we need to be talking with everyone in the office to say, hey, this bad thing happened, and I need your help in preventing it, right? And just having those conversations to say, this happened. Sometimes another set of eyes asking a different question or looking at it from a different lens can be all that you need to really develop a new process or change something entirely.
Awesome. From a fix standpoint, to kind of wrap this up, we should have some time for a little Q&A, but jump into, expand on this idea of what you need to do to fix. Nate and others can jump in.
Yeah, so I think all these bullet points are great. We've touched on a lot of this callback verification. Now, you're not, I know Mike has a strategy, and at the size of the company, you might be able to call back everyone. But most companies we're working with are looking to automate that, and secure automation is still secure, and it's okay. Something I want to call out here, though, is dual approval on money. If that's something that you're not doing today, sometimes triple approval on money. And this is specific to wiring or any sort of bank transfers, that type of thing. Someone in your organization, just like in my organization, has access to all of our money. And you need to build in controls around that. We've had customers actually stop wiring money and start sending checks because they had a wire fraud area. Well, if you think wire fraud is bad, get into check fraud. Don't send checks if you don't have to, especially if they carry your account number and routing information on it. So, deploy those tactics, and kind of every green bullet on here will make you one of those undesirable companies to come after.
Yeah, I think the three most important things for me as a brokerage or anybody in business: develop an SOP, have a checklist, and be consistent. Make sure that the guy that works the night shifts doing the same exact thing that during the day shift is doing, so the bad guys can't infiltrate that guy that they know doesn't do as good of a job. But consistency's got to be the most important thing in your company.
I would say with Nate, we implemented a call policy. So when we receive tenders, we're getting on the phone saying, hey, was this you that sent this to us? We also use that as a sales tactic to just simply get on the phone with their client, right? Spend some more time talking to them. But I do think the biggest thing you can implement is verification, right? Go from flying blind, one guy doing all the loads, I can handle this myself, to just say, hey, verify your client's activity at the end of the day or at some point in the day. I think that will help stop a lot of what's going on.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.